Thank you very much. And I would like right away to introduce the panel as well. Please join me here on the stage. We managed the first task, was to sit in the right place. Great. Very nice to see you all here. It's my pleasure to be trying to lead this conversation on a very interesting and very relevant topic for the next 35 minutes. And then there will be some time for questions from all of you. So prepare your questions as we speak. And I would like to start by asking you to introduce yourselves, and maybe at the same time you can also right away say what is the main issue with generative AI in your organization or in your line of work. Please.
Thank you, Virginia. So I'm Laetitia Caito. I lead our data and AI business in Europe. And I've been also recently asked to scale our generative AI footprint in the market and help our client reinvent themselves. I think the most difficult thing at the moment with generative AI is to distinguish the hype from the reality.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Julian Jameson. I'm an economist, a behavioral economist, and I'm now a senior research fellow at the Global Priorities Institute at the University of Oxford, which is a mix of economists and philosophers. So my role here is I'm not the AI expert, but thinking about the ethics of AI. I've also done a lot of work in developing countries, traveled not quite as much as Joost told us this morning that she'd been to 120 countries, but I've been to about 95 countries, done a lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa as well. So thinking about accessibility and the theme of this panel, and what can we do, and how does that bring in, how does that change? Can there even be some leapfrogging that happens the same way we've seen with mobile phones and others? Can generative AI bring some of that around to the world?
Awesome. Hey folks, hope I'm audible. Sanchit here. I am the Director of Product Big Data and Machine Learning with Booking.com. 18, 19 years in the industry, so I'm officially middle-aged, and have been working with data and data-light products for the last 5 years. The biggest concern for me right now is, as Laetitia said, separate the chaff from the grain. What in Gen AI can be productionized from an e-commerce point of view, from a tech point of view?
Great. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Amanda Lawson. I'm a research and policy analyst at the Responsible AI Institute. We're a nonprofit that helps businesses, organizations, people use AI responsibly, so build, buy, and sell in a responsible manner. In our work, we're constantly working with businesses, particularly now with generative AI, to discern that walking the walk versus talking the talk, and helping them put into practice responsible AI frameworks in alignment with best practices, standards. The issue that we're largely concerned with at the moment is looking toward regulation. The EU AI Act is coming, and we help people prepare for that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Paul Paoli, and I've just changed position, actually. I was in digital transformation for 6 years, and recently I've been appointed generative AI transformation director. And I've been formally trained in computer science, but 20 years ago, when it was AI was not so successful, let's say. So I moved to digital and actually marketing and L'Oréal business. I believe that the big topic currently is how do you balance seizing the opportunity with the risks involved, and that's why basically we have this kind of conversation. I must say that if we are going to your CEO in a company like 5 years ago with a project where you say, the tech is not so ready, from legal perspective we are not sure, ethic is a bit wary, and it costs a lot, maybe you don't get approval. So how do you do that properly is typically what keeps us at night.
Great, thank you. By the way, for the ones who are standing, I see there are reserved seats for you here. So if you want to sit, they are reserved there. So go ahead and sit there. Don't need to stand. Generative AI, it has been, of course, the big buzz, the big hype up at the last few months. If anything, from my perspective, it has generated a lot of speaking, a lot of keynotes and speaking engagements, panels, traveling. It generates maybe not only what we expect from the tools that are being used, but discussions like the one of today seem to give the idea that there is a price to pay for being accessible, for being responsible, for being user-centered and so on. Is that the impression that you have from your own organizations? Is this a price that we have to pay, or is it more like the obvious step that we need to ensure that these tools are accessible, are user-centered, are done in a responsible way?
Yeah, I can start. I have
go ahead.
I have a very strong opinion on the topic. I think being responsible when you put systems in place is not a new topic. You know, like we always should have embraced that during digital transformation, and we haven't. You know, that's where you see disinformation, that's where you see, you know, some challenge with social media and all of that. Now, suddenly, we talk a lot about being responsible with AI. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think we should have spoken about that topic much earlier. You know, like the two reasons is obviously the scale and the speed we're going at with that kind of technology is accelerating, if you want, in the common consciousness, the fact that we need to be much more responsible. And that's super important. And I think the power of the technology and the accessibility also make it more important. But it's a realization of the society, really, that this is important and should be there. And I think we had that realization moment, but that's not new. We haven't realized. So it went from being unconscious to being a conscious thing for all of us.
Yeah, I fully agree. If you know, we are less naive. You know, if we are back in 2005, we have the birth of social networks. Everybody was thinking, "Oh, let's be connected with, you know, anybody on Earth, and we'll all be friends, and etc." And personally, I added anybody on Facebook. Probably you did the same. And then 15 years later, you realize that maybe some people feel lonely. Maybe some people have issues. There are fantastic groups and communities and stuff happening with social networks, but there are also some drawbacks. And this is why, thanks to digital transformation, I think in the last few years, every human, so including company, has been thinking on how to make use of this technology in a more responsible way, starting with, let's say, responsible design from the beginning. So we had privacy, we had already discussion on AI, and now there is generative AI, so I would say it's an evolution of the practices and things we need to do before moving out and putting this kind of technology out.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I love that thread of what's new, what's the delta in terms of generative AI versus what we've seen before. Risk management frameworks are something that businesses are familiar with. With AI, what's new is just the scale of human decisioning, the input that goes into an AI system. By the time it travels downstream through the supply chain, it can just have a lot that's put into it that's not entirely clear. So with AI, there's the black box. It's more of a technical field, of course. So that's kind of what's different, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Thinking about where we were 10 years ago with cybersecurity, with those best practices and standards, we've got there. That field is much more mature. The same kind of thing is happening with AI. There's hundreds of standards in development that give you kind of the blueprint, but yeah, it's important to know where to look, what's new with generative AI. And there's a lot of exciting potential as well, of course. And I think we're just at the tip of that future, but it's important to think about the risk management frameworks. What we see at the Responsible AI Institute is that AI-specific frameworks, thinking, practices, and processes are just a must.
Just quickly build on that and agreeing with everything that people have said. I think sometimes people imagine responsible AI or safety or concerns is almost synonymous with slowing down. We've heard calls for pause or stopping. And I think that's a bit misguided in my view. So I think we do need responsible AI. We need to guide things. But there are all these potential benefits. And to be responsible, we have to make sure we encourage those and make sure everybody gets a chance to gain from generative AI and elsewhere. So I think it's sort of guiding what's happening, this new exciting push that we're seeing. And similar, I completely agree. It's similar. I mean, it's new, it's different, but we've seen lots of technologies come through, and overall, they've been. I'm an economist. It's been very beneficial for society. It's been a good thing that the technologies that come along and speed things up, allow us to do things, to automate things we haven't done before. This is another example of that. So we want to make sure everybody gets to benefit from it rather than necessarily slowing it down.
Cool. Yep. I will step in. So I'm representing the industry here. So we have a very practical approach to it. Right now we are finalizing, okay, what is the price? And what are we replacing? A price is not only, let's say, what's the cost of maybe fine-tuning a model or maybe deploying, and what are we replacing? It's also a regulation cost. Maybe, let's say, hypothetically, it's a new tool. If we breach the borders of EU AI Act, but EU AI Act is the only one act. There's DMA, there's DSA, and Europe is at the forefront of laws. What do we risk losing? Because any kind of compliance cost runs into millions for an organization like Booking.com. So we have to be very smart about it. So that's why we are very cognizant of the fact.
Okay, very good. So we're seeing greater power, with great power comes greater responsibility. Also, that responsibility is not some kind of add-on at the end. We have developed everything and now we dump some source of responsibility on top. So we really need to take it through the whole life cycle of the development and use of this type of technology. Maybe moving on, there are two directions. Let's go one by one. You talk about the cost of regulation, the cost of responsibility in a sense. Let's maybe try to turn this issue around. What are the benefits or the added value of the regulated environment, or an environment in which there are some directions, maybe self-regulation or outside regulation? What are the benefits? Why should we want regulation? Or why should we not if you are completely against it?
Absolutely. So maybe I will start. Europe has been on the forefront of regulations on a lot of things, right? Although in AI, China has taken the lead. So the first Chinese law called PIPL was already out before EU AI Act was thought of. There is a lot of value for having regulation because the new technology can be used in n number of ways, right? The very good example of social network is a very important example. If not developed properly, it can go all haywire. And AI has so many manifold applications, right? It's not only in the industry, in the e-commerce part. People are doing self-driving cars with AI. People are doing drug discovery with AI. There's n number of things, and those are the non-nefarious ones. There are a lot of non-state actors that can do a lot of nefarious activities. So I think EU is being very smart about it, and there's definitely value in having proper regulations around.
No,
any concrete examples? What would be a concrete value of regulation or of responsibility on your own field?
Very simply, if I may, if you have a list of approved models, it simplifies a lot of work. In practice, you spend time testing model A versus model B versus model C. Is it responsible? You need to audit all that, and so it's a lot of cost, and you do it. For two reasons, because you can bring value to the world, as we said, and we didn't develop that, but we believe in the firm end value of this technology for consumers, for stakeholders, for a lot of people. And you do that also because you have a competitive environment, so some other people will go. Typically, like with digital, it's empowering. I'm from L'Oréal, so quite sizable corporation, so it's empowering smaller players that can now do some stuff that couldn't do before. So the competitive environment is changing. And so you also have some pressure to do it. And it's a lot of cost to do it in a responsible way. And so it will make everybody happy if there is a good way to do it.
Yeah. I'll jump in as I'll try to keep it brief. As a big fan of regulation, other accountability mechanisms in the ecosystem, including first, second, and third-party assessments, conformity assessments, standards. It all works together to create the market, to push the market in a good place. The reason that's good for businesses, doing that third-party attestation. So we do certification of AI systems. You can have that stamp of approval. We know that consumers are looking for trust, especially as generative AI has exploded so much. People know more. There's still a lot of education to be done, but people know more about the risks. There's more hesitancy. So as a leader in AI and responsible AI, you can also have that doing the work and then showing it, translating it, showing it to customers. There's a lot of value in market differentiation there because as people were kind of chuckling earlier about how do you tell in the market what's real and what's not, there being kind of fake overpromised generative AI vendors in the market is just a disadvantage to others in the market. But yeah, there's a lot of benefits to doing that work, to getting the full value. BCG, Boston Consulting Group, to borrow a metaphor that they use in terms of AI and responsible AI, is the reason that race cars, if you picture a race car, they can go really quickly because they trust their brakes, they trust their pit crew, they know that the car, everything is checked out. It's the same thing with AI. To get the full value of AI, you need to know that you can trust what went into it, your teams, that there's training and governance around it. So just to cover your bases there is how you get the most value.
Yeah. Very often we see in the news, US innovate and EU regulate. And I think, and that's very pejorative, and that's across the world. And I think we may be at the cusp of having regulation as a competitive advantage in the EU, just for the purpose and the reason that have been called out before. So when the technology, the Gen AI technology was accessible, on OpenAI and all of that, free for all, you were signing terms and conditions. And it's the same with most tools, yeah? You kind of click a box, you accept pretty much all the risk, but you have no clue of the data that have been used. You don't know if it's copyrighted. You don't know if that's breaching privacy and all of that. In the EU Act, the traceability of the data is essential. The fact that it's governed data is essential. The fact that you need to disclose how much CO2 emission you're actually creating when you do your model is essential. Yep. So it's bringing the same with data sets, standard data sets, so you can see the quality of the different things. So I think this regulation is fundamental for us to trust what we use and actually really know and be, that those organizations are transparent and we can share that transparency in creating new products, yeah? So, I think I'm really hopeful that this is going to make EU much more competitive because we will be on the market in a much more transparent way and we'll be able to establish trust with our product much more than other markets.
Very briefly, just I think similar kinds of things. Stability, especially in something as dynamic, maybe even chaotic as AI and how quickly it's moving, having some sense of guardrails, not regulation blocking or getting in the way, but allowing to trust, to look forward that way, to say, what do we expect? What do we know? What are the different players in the field going to have to follow the rules? That way everybody knows what to expect and can work together. So I do think having that sense of sort of shared, here's where we're going, here's what we need to do, allows everyone to move forward.
Thank you. We're talking about user-friendliness in generative AI. Some of you already approached the topic of awareness and the general public awareness of what these tools are, what they can do, what they cannot do. By moving into a more user-friendly approach, there are opportunities, of course, because people can use, and there will be simpler interfaces and more natural types of interface to address and to use this type of technology. But it might come with some costs as well. For instance, making a simpler interface might become something which it doesn't allow to use the full potential of the tools. But at the same time, it might be that the more friendliness these tools are, the more the risk will be of misusing or wrongly use of these tools. Is these issues, how do you see these potentials, the positive and the negative potentials of user friendliness, and how can we address that from the perspective of the education and awareness of the general public?
I can start if you want. I think the user friendliness make it accessible for pretty much everybody, and what we see a lot is siloed POC, completely disconnected from the enterprise. And I think the user friendliness makes any developer or even business user able to get some value with some of those tools. What's the big risk is we kind of end up with a lot of noise because those things don't scale, they don't connect with the enterprise, they don't transform. So I think the risk there is to kind of and we've, as AI practitioner, we've been there for years, where things stay siloed and don't transform. And it will create a lot more noise, and it'll be much harder to see the tree from the forest and what's really bringing value, to society and to the organization. So for me, that risk is actually very big because, people think Gen AI resolve everything, but actually it's generative AI, it's some coexistence of the technology that really make something meaningful for the transformation of society or companies more broadly.
Yeah. I think, though, that I'm not sure the debate is really on user friendliness versus regulation on the model, as we said, certification, privacy evaluation, etc., etc. Because user friendliness inherently, I see rather good things. Computers 30 years ago, you had to type a cryptic instruction in a terminal, and very few people were using it. And now you have a graphical interface, and everybody is happy. And basically, you can break your computer a bit less because of the computer interface. So I'm not sure it's really about the interface, but rather, again, what you do behind, the scale of the API, the model behind, and etc., etc.
Exactly. From an enterprise point of view, user friendliness is not a blocker on compliance. So let's say hypothetically, if I am an end user, I can just go to the ChatGPT app and type any random thing. But if I'm Booking.com or Amazon or Facebook, I'm not using the public API. There are gates around it. Without getting into the technicalities, you can fine-tune a model. You can have retrieval augmented generation, which is putting a vector database, etc., in the backend. So user friendliness is good for, let's say, you and me as an end consumer to try out, but that is not where the money is being made, where actually the enterprise regulations come into the picture. So this has not been an issue, at least from a Booking.com point of view.
I think education hasn't been, in a lot of other areas, hasn't been super successful. I'm a big fan of education, it's a good thing, but specific education for financial awareness, financial well-being, which is one area I've looked at, is not typically successful. And I would say also here, I'm not sure that targeted information campaigns are going to make the difference. I think having people practice, so the user friendliness, so people are out there taking advantage of it, playing around with it, I think is a great thing. And for instance, talk about deep fakes now, Photoshop was around before, everyone's used to that now. So the fact that you can have a still image of somebody which looks completely realistic, people thought early on that was going to change the world. Everyone was going to get confused. You could do all kinds of crazy things with it. People get very used to that. They've seen it all the time. I think the same thing's going to happen with videos. Just having people explore it and know what they're doing is going to be fine.
Yeah. A big fan of user friendliness, big fan of education. I think that if you kind of look at it from a values-based approach, explainability, interpretability, bias and fairness have to do with people being able to understand and trust the system to some extent. With AI, we have a very low degree of knowledge in the general public, so it's kind of even harder to build that trust. For businesses, the best practices that come from those principles are then doing user testing, doing surveying, being in touch with stakeholders, making sure that you're doing training internally, you're doing checklists and guides and multiple kinds of guidance on how to use the AI system. Explainability then could be global or local. So in the case of a job application where AI might be used. You want to understand how the AI was used in determining if you got the job or not, how people were involved. And then, yeah, so there are a lot of best practices that are related to that are important, that connect to building trust, that are really necessary to do, to make sure that you're protected kind of on the back end, on the security end, doing user experience testing, but the red teaming aspect of it, of trying to do adversarial testing, doing a focus group and seeing, okay, your goal is to take advantage of this AI system, like let's see what you can come up with. That work is really important. So the connection between all of the different kinds of users and the developer and the intent behind the system is important throughout the life cycle, as you were saying.
Continuing in the topic of education and awareness, but now focusing also on my role as educator, as professor at university, as your organizations move on and move forward on the uptaking of generative AI, what kind of competences from your staff, from the people you want to hire, what kind of competences are possibly missing? What kind of competences do you think need to change as we really want to move into the positive and responsible use and uptake of generative AI? Is there anything missing? Do you have every competence that you need?
So I'm not sure it's an exact, competence. So you can say it's critical thinking or whatever. But I think there is one very simple experience you can do, and you have probably done as an AI practitioner with ChatGPT or whatever. Like you do exactly. You ask the same question, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, an infinite number of answers. Mm-hmm. So for a computer tool, it's very new. So I think getting used to that, like having this familiarity to really understand in a deep way that it's just a kind of probability, and a lot of time it's not bad, but in some cases it's very, very bad. It's a totally different type of training from a very practical point of view. Like so, how you use it is very different from how you use Excel, basically.
Yeah.
I'll jump in here with, there's been some interesting research about how people are using generative AI. Of course, we're at the point now where millions of people have used some kind of large language model tool. And there's research, again, by BCG, they're on my mind today, but about, we're looking at the changing of the workforce. We're looking at changes to the tasks that people are doing. Oftentimes people can put too much trust in what something like ChatGPT is not meant to do, which is fact-checking. It's just not what it's designed to do. So the best practice that translates from that, which we help businesses create and put out internal guidelines and policies and practices, do's and don'ts. But what comes from that is always fact check, always have a human in the loop before language goes out the door, make sure that a human reads through it, tests it, particularly a diverse group of people to do that testing. But generally that's what we're seeing. But the benefits of it, of using ChatGPT or generative AI for lead generation, for marketing, for sales, kind of what we do whenever we do offer training in responsible AI, it's that initial kind of understanding, what is the system, what is it designed to do, what is it not designed to do, what are appropriate uses. These are all things that businesses should be communicating to people inside and outside of the company of what you should and should not do.
Yeah, from our point of view, there are two aspects to it. One, what kind of roles that already exist are changing, which is, let's say, software engineering, right? If you look at something like GitHub Autopilot or Code Whisperer from Amazon, it's ridiculous. It's the developer productivity has ridiculously changed. I last coded 15 years back, I can code again. It's as simple as that, right? So in that aspect, I think the market dynamic is changing in that industry. So maybe a software developer 5 years down the line won't be the software developer you have today. Maybe you don't need as many software developers. Code can do it. I just read a paper in the morning. Facebook developed a LLM that can actually find a bug on its own. Mm-hmm. So you don't need a QA. Yeah. Do you need a quality assurance engineer? So that is one aspect to it. The second aspect that we have is what kind of new roles that are coming out. So obviously this responsible AI governance area is something that every big tech is actually deploying. Okay, what are the kind of use cases that you can actually solve with AI? And are we skirting any legal issues? Another thing that is coming up a lot is prompt engineering, a total new area of engineering. Basically, how do you prompt, how do you coax a LLM deployed module to actually do something? Because an LLM is not deterministic. It's not your coded 1 and zeros. You can actually ask a LLM 4 out of 5 times, it will give a different answer, even for 2 plus 2. Right? It's ridiculous. Right? So there's a new area of engineering also a lot of people are coming on it.
I think this non-binary aspect, probabilistic, that gives different answers, is really key. I heard somebody use the analogy recently of a dial. So we're used to 0, 1 in computer terms. It's the hashtag is there or not. It's a fake or it's not a fake. You're a coder or not a coder. And now everything is much more in between. You can dial it up and down. We see that, of course, with generative AI and the images, but I think much more broadly in terms of roles and how we interact with the technology as well.
Yeah, I mean, in Accenture, we've trained a lot of our people. You know, as you say, there's new role, you know, prompt engineering, or even coexistence architect. In terms of architecture, it's been a long time where we didn't look at an IT estate and actually re-injected, you know, large language model in many things, in your ERP, you know, on the side, in some of the custom coded, in a digital transformation. So there's a lot of new roles. So we are standing up a number of courses, which we call our Gen AI Academy, which cover a number of things. But they also cover, you know, the interface, because if you look at a large language model, ultimately you can speak to them in natural language. And that's a new thing if you compare it to an app or a website. And, you know, our designers for interfaces need to think differently about how this, you know, AI as the new UI thing is going to really interact with the customer. So there's a number of new possibilities that needs people to be trained and embrace, you know, that those new possibilities. Yeah.
Great. Before I open the stage for the public to ask questions, maybe just very short, and try to be really short. What, from your perspective, is either the main opportunity that you see with Gen AI as we move forward, or the main challenge? And be to the point, because we need some time for the questions.
Well, I think we've talked about the challenges.
Yes, so what is the main opportunity?
So probably in terms of opportunity for a company like us, we see two big areas. One is about obviously marketing. We believe that we work in beauty, and we see worldwide an aspiration for more personalized beauty advices, like hyper-personalized, maybe singular. This is what we call beauty for each. And we believe that this type of technology enable us to deliver this beauty for each vision. And from another perspective, internally, again, we talked about all the risk, but it can help you being more creative. If you brainstorm with ChatGPT, things happen which are very interesting. It can help you automate some very heavy task even more than today, and it can probably help you find what you're looking for. So basically, that's another area where we want to explore.
Beauty and marketing. Let's go to the point. What is your opportunity?
Response is the best way to get the most value out of AI is to take a responsible frame to it. A great way to do that is there's already kind of a set of answers, the cheat sheet. It's in development, but conformity assessments, as in conforming with the upcoming laws and regulations. There are a lot of great people out there doing that work of standards development and can tell you, from this idea, here's what the research says about it, here's what you should do. So conformity assessments is my final thought.
From our point of view, I think I can summarize it in one point. The challenge and the opportunity is any new technology paradigm, like LLMs or like Gen AI, is equivalent to the last technology paradigm that we had, which was internet. A lot of things went up and down. A lot of organizations we thought are going to stay for the next 10, 20 years just vanished. I think this is what is being expected of this technological revolution as well.
Would go back to the personalization and individualization, I think, especially thinking of, as I said, developing countries and the leapfrogging idea I mentioned at the beginning on technologies, mobile phones, mobile money, and I think you see that now with mobile health. You can see that with building individual digital brands. So the chance to sort of move beyond and jump ahead, be familiar. They're very young as well as tech savvy actually out there, and so I think we'll see the AI being able to sort of really change the way they view things.
For me, it's challenging the orthodoxies. So every time I go to a particular client, they would say, "Oh, it's like that," and it's been like that for 20 years because of X, Y, Z, depending on the industry. And I think the technology allows to challenge those things that people in industry have believed is true for that many years. I have great hope. We've seen in a keynote on climate change that we can solve, some of those challenges on climate. I'm very hopeful we can solve with health, with generative AI and the multimodality of health, and we can potentially solve cancer and things like that. So a lot of hope from my side on debunking some of those orthodoxy, but creating a great future ahead. Yeah.
Very good. So I think we do have some time for questions from the public. I see one there and one here at least. I see a couple. There is someone with a mic, yes. All the way at the back, that was the first one I saw. And then there is one here.
Thank
and
you.
one somewhere there. Yeah, please.
Having inaccurate information is dangerous than having no information. Do you see this as one of the biggest roadblocks for enterprise adoption, especially when it comes to generative AI? Beyond, let's say, the technical debts organizations are accumulating, considering that how fast this is changing every day? That was the question. Thank you.
Absolutely. There's a reason why my title is Big Data and ML, because data is the bedrock of any ML model. Your machine learning model, or LLMs are machine learning models, are only as good as the data they are trained on. So it's a non sequitur. It goes without saying. Yeah.
Given the time, I don't know if anyone has a very different answer. Otherwise, I will give you the opportunity to answer another question. There is one here and someone there. Yes.
So I do similar, where I go and meet with companies, and I also go and meet with SaaS companies. And what I tend to find, which I'm curious on your take, because it deals with economics, is first you're dealing with restructuring. The employees do not know about going detailed into prompts, so they're using ChatGPT. They have none of that clue about driving in. And the question then bounces to the SaaS solutions that I work with and the companies. Let's say they're predominantly using ChatGPT, and the token fees are not cheap, and it raises an extensive cost. And so what I tend to find is that the software companies that want Gen I to provide to their end user and make it easy for all these things, once they realize how expensive these token fees are, they want to subset that. Ditto with the companies that are doing enterprise 3.5 on the cost. So what do you say to a company that recognizes it can be a financial hit? At the same time, they're laying off people during a restructuring. How do you get them to get that buy-in, recognizing there is a financial hole that can take place?
Our economist.
The question was, briefly in case you didn't know, so restructuring and SaaS and buy-in with the expensive token fees. That's a great point. Well, I think that's going to change quickly is one thing. And so acknowledging that, and of course there's a trade-off there between being a first mover or an early mover, which is important, but also waiting to see what happens. And I think we're not settled yet into an equilibrium of how much is everything going to be individualized at the company level versus sort of off-the-shelf LLMs. And some of my industry co-panelists here may be able to speak to that better. But I think it's not an easy answer. There is a real trade-off there. And I think for a given company at a given point, are they in a space where they need to change things up? In this case, maybe it's worth it to take the risk and take the hit, or is actually everything kind of going okay and it's not worth jumping on the bandwagon yet and waiting until things settle in a little bit?
I would just add that, yeah, I love the idea of it's not always the right decision not everyone needs their own generative AI tool with its own spin on it. Like sometimes the best, most responsible choice can be not building an AI tool. But yeah, it goes into that cost benefit analysis, and we encourage people to think about Is AI even needed at all? Because if not, it's an unnecessary risk to think about.
And I would like to add just that point around decision. The longevity of decision has shortened. You know, before we used to take decision for a fiscal year or for an investment year. So it's also acknowledging that it may be the right decision right now, but we need to revisit in 3 months or things like that, or even faster than that. Yeah. So I think decision maker, and we all feel it because the pace of everything and is a lot less settled than it used to be, is revisiting those decisions. And I think as leaders, you know, being used to constantly rethinking what's the best move, is it time to review that decision is an important thing too.
It has been a great discussion, and I thank you all for the discussion, but it seems that the amount of noise and movement that they are creating to get us out of the stage is increasing, so they really mean that we should go out. I'm very sorry. It's a pity to not be able to continue the discussion, but will be opportunities outside in the corridors and so on. Thank you for a great discussion, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.